Welcome to the ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum. My name is Paul Adepoji, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar on photojournalism. And there is a lot of difference and reasons why photojournalism continues to be very relevant from generation to generation, especially in the light of pandemics. We do talk a lot about previous pandemics, especially those that happened in the early 20th century. Very few people were able to read the stories about this pandemic, but the pictures are still available, telling better stories, allowing us to have a more vivid and accurate idea of what really went down, so that the world can learn from the experience of those years and apply the knowledge for the present and future pandemics. But beyond the roles of photojournalism in keeping a permanent record of development that are irrefutable by anybody, it's also a thriving sector it's a thriving industry, and there are several individuals that are successful at it, and it's not a career that you just pick along the way. And for you to be able to succeed at it, you have to really know the nitty-gritty of how it all works. So that is the focus of today's webinar, which is on carving a niche in photojournalism and getting published in major platforms. We have a professional photojournalist who is a resource person today in person of Mr. KC Nwakolor. KC, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right. How about you?
Oh, I'm glad. I'm very excited to be hosting you today, and which actually promises to be an exciting section, considering the interest of our members on this subject and the availability of questions already. Even before we are starting this webinar today, we already have some questions for you. And for those that are joining us on Zoom, if you have any question regarding photojournalism, we have a Q&A section on the Zoom platform for you to put up your questions, and they are going to be asked at the right time. And if you are joining us via the Facebook live stream, I encourage you to put your comments, your questions as comments under this video. And without much ado, I would like to hand this over to Casey. But before Casey gives us his presentation, I have a question for him already on what he thinks how he thinks COVID-19 has really impacted the art and practice of photojournalism. Can we quickly take that before we take a full presentation?
Okay. Good day, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, for me, you said your question is how COVID-19 has impacted photojournalism.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think it has impacted photojournalism in the sense that, as a result of the travel restrictions and, people are not able to, get in close or travel to places to tell stories using their cameras. But also by extension, it has also kind of shown how, in my own experience, how different media organizations in the world prioritize stories in their own region first, so it also takes us back to, get into a place where we have local, publications that are also telling our own stories. And the truth is, most of for all the years I've worked as a photojournalist, I've never had like a local publication hire me. So if hiring you, so who is going to tell the stories of this unprecedented time in the context of your own country? And I think that's a limitation. And but it's what it is. And everyone, storytellers are trying to do what they can in their own capacity. But yeah, that's basically the more of the impact, apart from the general experience of loneliness, general anxiety. Are we going to survive this? Is this the end of the world? But apart from that, I think, narrowing it down to the practice, I think that's one way it has particularly affected me.
Yeah, I know, and it's really something that I look forward to learning more about your journey. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to start with this presentation by KC that looks at his journey as a photojournalist. So let's load that your amazing slide, and so I can take it away, and I'll go back with lots of questions for you, KC.
Okay. Yeah, let me. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Uh,
Can you see my
not,
screen?
not yet.
Really?
Oh,
Let me
yes, it's
stop.
showing now. Very
Oh,
good.
oh my God. Oh, I
Yes.
stopped it. Okay, let me do it again. Yeah, you can see it now, right?
Oh, yes, yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is KC Nwakolor. I'm a documentary photographer, photojournalist, and also a producer based in Abuja, Nigeria. I started off photography in 2016 when I just finished university, and I was also like thinking about what to do with my life. But I didn't start off as a photojournalist. I started off taking pictures of events, weddings, and in my pursuit of trying to do something that has like a bigger meaning or something that is bigger than me. That's when I kind of delved into documentary photography and photojournalism. Yeah, I like to call myself a documentary photojournalist because I feel um, just the term, I would like to call myself a documentary photographer and photojournalist, but it's too long. So I just call it documentary photojournalist because I'm not like very drawn to single spot news type of stories. I try to tell my stories in multiple pictures, and that's where documentary comes in. Uh, Also, kind of respecting all the ethics and conducts of journalism, in my practice. So with my work, I try to humanize real issues. So this is to say that like if there are no issues in the world, I probably wouldn't be doing photography. So with my work, I try to humanize real issues. I try to show issues as people, kind of show you the people that are affected by the lack of water in a community, who are affected by war, whatever it is. But rather than just using numbers and statistics, I want to show the real people that are involved in the situation. And over the years, the type of work I've done is around health, socioeconomic issues, and environmental issues. And this has led me to produce work for a number of publications like the New York Times, Bloomberg, and a host of other NGOs. Yeah. So today, I've given a brief, little bit introduction about my journey as a photojournalist, but if I'm to get a little bit deeper, um, it's just me being frustrated by all the things that are going on, in our country. I'm based in Abuja, Nigeria, and I grew up in Enugu State, which is a southeastern state in Nigeria. But I moved to Abuja in 2010, because I was getting my university education here. And, from the university education, I studied biology. I had a BSc biology, which is very, very unrelated from what I practice now. But I still think it's related in the sense that I also do stuff around health and environment. But that wasn't the course like I wanted to do fully, but that was what was available. So I had to do that. Then initially, me switching to photography was more of there are lots of unemployed graduates and stuff. And for me, it was more of getting a skill, earning a living, and making something out of it. And that's how I started off, taking pictures of people for their weddings, events, and so on. Until, my mom asked one question, which was very critical to my journey as a photojournalist. She said, you're just doing this photography thing until until you get a real job, right? And it kind of pushed me to a place where I had to start thinking about my life and whether I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. I was already getting bored of weddings, events, and stuff. It felt like it was the same thing over and over. And there wasn't like a place for my intellectuality or, thinking and research or analysis or whatever like that. So that's when I came across documentary photography and photojournalism. I'm like, okay, with my pictures, we have a lot of problems around us. Maybe I can talk about them. And maybe if I talk about them, maybe there could be like some form of solution to the problem. So I'm not just making money from my pictures, but I'm also telling stories, in a way that people could relate to it, and it could ultimately bring about a positive result in those people's lives, and that has been my driving force. And I like the fact that, in photojournalism, it's new every single time. One story is different from the next story, I've done stories on diamonds, I've done stories on sickle cell anemia, I've done stories on severe acute malnutrition, I've done stories on migration, So for every single topic that you work on, you become more knowledgeable on that topic. And for me, that is like the dream, like that I'm getting more information as I do more stories. So, to kickstart my career as well, I had to volunteer for an organization because, when you're starting off, it's difficult to get yourself out there, and, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm a photojournalist, but where's your work? What have you done? Who have you shot for? So I kind of had to volunteer for an NGO that I knew was doing the type of work I was interested in. And, I started taking pictures, and I started developing. Then I went further to do a course at New York Institute of Photography, where I did a certificate course in photojournalism. And it kind of taught me the things I needed to know about, photojournalism is not just about taking pictures. There are layers to it. There are lots and lots of layers to it. Like taking the actual pictures is probably like 40-30% of the real work. So that's how I delved into it, and I've continued to grow. I've continued to attend a couple of workshops and photography portfolio reviews. Yeah. So going back, also linked to carving a niche for myself. I think from my own experience, I think if you don't have a niche, it limits it kind of limits how deep you can go into what you're doing. And that's why I think it's important to have a niche. Even in photojournalism industry in Nigeria, there are photographers or documentary photographers that the specific type of stories they work on. And if you work on things that you are very much interested in, you are more likely to produce something in depth, rather than just doing everything. And for me, how I carved a niche for myself is to kind of look at my own experience growing up, look at the type of education I got, and I looked at the kind of things that was interesting for me. So even in writing, there are non-fiction writers, fiction writers and stuff. So that's why it's important for you to look at, what draws closest to you, what makes most sense to you, and focus on that and continue to develop and expand on that. And that's how you carve a niche for yourself. Yeah. Then if we were to talk about getting published, for a number of works I've done, I've had the photo editor reach out to me, because they have seen my work somewhere, or, they have seen it on a website or social media or whatever. But they reach out to me and say, hey, look at the work we want you to do. Look at what the story we want you to tell, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't have that type of platform, if you don't have that type of visibility, you can go ahead and produce the work that you are most passionate about and reach out to editors in these publications, telling them that you would want to get published, kind of making a case for your story and why it should be published. So, in that sense, it's more like you putting up like a proposal, arranging your work, writing the narrative in this way, like, the person kind of understand the value or why their publication needs to do that. And when you're doing this also, it's important to look at the type of stories that publication is already producing. So there are a lot of publications say, oh, we can publish anything, but in reality, they have a style, they have the type of stories they're interested in. So it helps to kind of do this little research to kind of know the type of publications that you can reach out to for the content you have, if that makes sense. So another part that I like to talk about is ethical storytelling, because we can't lie or pretend that there is no power dynamics between the photographer and the subject in that picture. And a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say things like, they are giving voice to the voiceless. I don't think there is anyone that is voiceless. I think our work as photojournalists or as journalists in general is to kind of elevate or make those voices heard rather than saying you're giving a voice to the voiceless. And in telling stories, it's also important to understand, keep in mind that these dynamics exist, and it also influences how you tell these stories. One of the things that I am very heavy on is consent. So as storytellers, as photojournalists, it's important for us to get consent from whoever we are photographing and make sure that the consent is informed. So if you plan to use the pictures on social media or to use it on publications, it's very, very key you make it known to the person you're photographing how these pictures will be used and why you are doing the work. And you have to be very honest about it. If you're dealing with children, then you have to get consent from their guardians or their parents. This is very, very key. Another part is photographing people in a dignifying way. As I continue to grow in my practice, I've seen, lots and lots of debates about Western gaze, about, colonialism using the lens, white saviorism and stuff like that. And these are the things you have to be very, very careful about, because it's not just Westerners or whatever, storytellers that do these things, because we also kind of contribute and perpetuate this type of behaviors. And also this thing goes down to stereotypes, which is more like every story that has to come out of Africa or Nigeria, on other countries in Africa, is going to be stories of poverty, stories of war, of famine or whatever, So I'm not saying these issues are not there, but it's also important that we photograph people with dignity. So for me, like, it's a very slippery slope. So for me, the way I try to stay in check is when I photograph people, first I ask myself, will I photograph my parents this way? Would I photograph my siblings this way if they were in this kind of situation? So I put that little effort or that extra effort to make sure that, at least in my own understanding, which obviously evolves over time, that I'm at least taking pictures of these people in a dignifying way. And for me, I think once that awareness is there, it kind of activates you and you start noticing the patterns and you understand whether you're doing it right or wrong. Another thing is also have people, ask people, hey, do you want to be photographed in this clothes? But I mean, it's different in photojournalism. I'm talking when you're doing more of a documentary project, which is more laid back. But in photojournalism, you can't really influence the outcome. You can't tell people to change their clothes. You either take the picture or you don't, you know. So you wouldn't tell people to act unless it's a portrait, and you have to make it clear that it's a portrait. So there are lots and lots of ethics that we have to also consider as photojournalists, you know, which is also about like impacting or changing the outcome of the situation, you know, getting too involved, you know, and also the importance of telling our stories objectively. You know, objectivity also can be questioned to an extent. But for me, I think the most important thing is making sure that you're at least working in the best professional outlook or output you can give. So, you know, I've done a lot of talking. I'm not much of a talker. I'm a photojournalist, so I kind of speak with my pictures for the most part. So I'll just show a couple of my projects that I've done. Some have been published on the New York Times, you know, some has been published on Bloomberg, somewhere for NGOs, but I selected a few projects that I feel I find very interesting, and I've put them together for your own view. The first one that is going to show is Tales of OU Reached Out, and this is a project I did in 2018. It's still an ongoing project, but basically the project is about investigating or highlighting the human cost of oil exploration in the Niger Delta or in that region. So I kind of like, you know, it's a mixture of stories that has to do with soot pollution, you know, in Port Harcourt City, where there is like bunch of soot in the atmospheric air. And, you know, it's kind of causing health issues for a lot of people. Some are having bronchitis from having cancer. You know, people that have asthma, you know, is making things worse for them. And, you know, how convoluted this situation is, because it's difficult to say, okay, this is who the problem is. This is who is not the problem. It also goes further to investigate how, you know, oil exploration, gas flaring sites is affecting lives of students in schools that have their schools close by, you know, to a gas flaring site, dealing with the sound that comes from that, you know, the cracking sound that comes from all those gas flaring sites. It also analyzes the issues with the farmers, you know, how it has affected their crop yield, fishermen, how they have to travel really deep into the sea now to kind of catch fishes as a result of oil spillage and pollution that has happened in that region. Yeah, let me just show you guys a few of the pictures. So she lost her brother to bronchitis, and she thinks, you know, it's really connected to this pollution in the region. You know, she's a student, so I asked her, like, you know, can she like show me how the sound from the gas flaring site makes her feel? And that was her reaction to it, you know, like, oh, like it's so annoying when teacher is teaching and you have to like, you know, deal with that noise. You know, even fishermen, they have to go really deep into the sea and have a life vest. Yeah, for her, I kind of asked her like to hold down with cotton, you know, hold the cotton down. And this was how dirty how black her hands became. And this is basically the contents of the air, you know, people are kind of inhaling in this region. You know, I also recently, and that was last year in 2020, I also did a project about the rising heat or the rising temperature in the Niger Delta. And this was part of a broader piece about rising temperature all around the world that New York Times commissioned, and they It was between like 6, 7 photographers from different continents of the world. And I was the photographer from Africa, and I did this story in Port Harcourt as well. So this family, they kind of live like in front of a gas flaring site. And, this stuff burns 24/7. And, the impact and how it's affecting their lives, the heat they have to endure every single second of their life living in that region. So I kind of documented how they were coping with these realities, and, for the world to also understand how this thing is impacting their lives. You can see like how close the gas flaring site is to them. And, this is just one, and there are like 4 of them in this very environment. And that's what they have to deal with. They have to have their bath like multiple times a day. And even that doesn't save, them from sweating a lot, from the region. She also uses like talcum powder to rub on the skin of her child to kind of ease the scratch and how the heat affects them. As a result of the high heat in this region, it has also made house chores that you would do with ease, become more difficult to do because of the high temperature in that region. This story is about the Peace Diamond, like they called it. It's a 709 carat diamond that was found in Sierra Leone in 2017. As at the time, it was like the 15th largest diamond in the world. And, a lot of us have also seen like stories about how diamond has been in the center of a lot of conflicts around the world. So for this guy, when he found this diamond, he didn't want to sell it to the typical dealers because he felt, he wouldn't make, he would be cheated. So he went directly to the government, and the government put it up for auction in trust that the government will use a part of the money to develop its community where this diamond was found, which was Koidu. And then he would just get a little cut and a cut for all the people that worked for him. Yeah, I also went back there to see, the progress of the infrastructure, the schools and whatever that the government promised, but it has been a bit slow. Yeah, so that's the work. It was published in Bloomberg Business Week. The diamond was ultimately sold for, I think, six point something $million. This was where the diamond was found, in the village. Yeah, and another story I did is, a lot of us knew about the issue in South Africa, xenophobia attacks on Nigerians and other Africans living in South Africa. So I documented the return of some of these Nigerians to Nigeria, and how devastating it was for them to leave everything behind, and flee the country they have lived years of their lives in, without like any plans of what are they going to do when they are back or something. So I documented it, and it was published on the New York Times. The man with a damage on his left eye, he was attacked during one of the previous xenophobic attacks. And it damaged his eyes, so he had to return with his children that he had in South Africa. But yeah, it's very tragic, but it also shows the dynamic of migration and how it can be interpreted. Or it's not just a Western African thing, it happens even between states in a country. It's very complicated. So for this one I did a story about how landmine and other explosive ordinances were affecting people. So when there is a conflict in a region, there are children also impacted, because there has been cases of children just walking on the streets in places in like Borno State, in some communities, and they pick up stuff and they don't know it's an explosive, and so I worked with this NGO that is kind of teaching children, women, men, how to identify this type of items and what to do so that everyone is safe. Yeah. This boy, Bakura, he and his brother picked up an item. It was shiny, as he described. And, kids being kids, they picked it up and they were playing with it. They brought it back to the camp, and they just wanted to cut off the shiny place, and boom, it exploded. It was an RPG, so it exploded, killed his brother like immediately, and gave him like very bad scars, and also affected some people living in the neighborhood. It's really a miracle that he survived. This is the neighbor that was just sitting like few meters away from their own tent, and gave her this permanent scars. Is also, in that region, there are people that like rings and stuff. And this guy, he kind of cuts out rings from used bullets, because, people will always play with what they have around them. So he was cutting out this bullet that he thought it was used, but it wasn't used, and boom, it exploded and shot into his legs, into his thighs. And it's lucky that it didn't destroy any of his bones or anything like that. So now, with the education around, this type of explosive devices and what you should do to stay safe, and having it written and translated in local language, it keeps everyone safe. And one child tells the other child, same with women in this community. He was a herdsman. When he was moving around with his cow, he saw something on the ground and he didn't know what it was. He used the stick to hit it to know what, and boom, so this type of education has really been very helpful, because children are caught up in this crisis, and children will always be children, playing with what they have access to, which is really a terrible reality. And the last project I want to show is about, which is also relevant in the context of COVID, when you talk about vaccine and vaccine skepticism, so with this project I did with an organization, that what they did, in some parts of parts of the northern Nigeria. This was in Sokoto State. There was like a lot of skepticism about vaccination and, inoculation and all that. So what these people had to do was to get like local leaders, trusted voices, to record their voices telling people the importance of taking vaccine and why they should take them. And not just that, you would get a call. They had to like get the numbers of every household in that region and kind of call them individually. But these calls were like robocall. It was a robot-based phone call, but it felt like, your leader in the community was telling you, get this vaccine, is important, it keeps your children safe. And it really worked, for some households, the wives had their own phones. For some households, the man had the phone. And at the end, it kind of encouraged more people to get the vaccine or to get immunized. Yeah. They also use like taking pictures of these kids as an incentive, in places, some of the places in these communities, like this might be the only pictures that they have of their children at this age. So in as much as it's printed in an A4 paper, it still meant a lot for them. And, they kept it and they cherished it, which is also like something to make them to want to get that vaccine and keep their children safe. So, I come to the end of my presentation, but I also want to make it very clear that, like, photojournalism in its own is very unique in the sense that pictures are able to, cross the lines. There are no restrictions in terms of interpretation, understanding. There are no language barriers. People could just see pictures and relate to it. They, regardless of your tribe, your race, or whatever, people could easily look at a picture and kind of get the message behind it. And, so imagine a piece with, right. And I think that's also why photojournalism became very valuable, because rather than just writing about the stories, people are able to also see who these people are and get this type of feelings and understand what their realities are about, So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, KC. And those are very, very lovely pictures. And it shows how far you've really gone and how in-depth you are as a photojournalist. And those are really, really amazing pictures. And
Yeah.
as you'll have been seeing the notifications popping up. And
Yeah.
before I take some of the questions that you have, there is a burning question, especially when you mentioned ethics of photojournalism, and this has to
Yeah.
do with editing,
Yeah.
which is how do you quick background, if you've followed conversations around some controversial pictures used by some magazines regarding how somebody's skin tone was over-lightened or over-darkened, maybe to that is aligned with some stereotypes. So how do you handle editing your pictures to avoid those kinds of issues?
Um, for me, like my edit is minimal, yeah, in the sense that, like, I try to get everything right on the field in the field. With photo editing softwares, I just do sometimes a bit of cropping. Then other times, is pretty much It's really weird seeing myself talk. But yeah, it's pretty much more about lighting, more about highlights, shadows, less of changing color. I don't want to change the color of anything, because I want things to look the way I saw them. And, some top photojournalism platforms like Reuters, you probably go out to the extent of, hey, don't even edit the picture, like they just want you to publish it the way it is. So like I said, the ethics are clearly listed out. You know that you are altering the reality in that picture, So for me, like the base of the whole thing is making sure that the pictures you're taking is real, and it's not fiction. It's real. You're dealing with real people, and also making sure that you are not overly overly, how would I put it? Like trying to sensationalize the picture when it's not really what is obtainable in the reality. And also, it also goes as far as how people compose their pictures, because people say that pictures don't lie, but I mean, it's not true, because depending on the angle you take the picture, depending on the time, because why pictures is difficult is because for a stretch of something that happens in maybe like an hour, you get like 5 pictures to show this thing, like, and this is just less than a second of what happened in this time. So that's why I think it's important for the people that are telling the stories, storytellers, photojournalists, they make sure that at least they are objective, they are capturing the whole truth, kind of, in their own capacity, and make sure that they are not taking advantage or trying to further a specific type of narrative, rather than just seeking the truth and highlighting what is important and what they saw, just being like why am I losing this word? Like just just being there, present, to kind of say,
Okay.
this is what I saw, and
Yeah.
I want you to see it, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes a whole lot of sense. And Betty Johnson would like to know. Betty Johnson said the interest is there in photojournalism, but there is no experience as well. So the question is, if one wants to put time to this, what are the plans, A to Z? Is there a course, or what equipment should one have?
I think the first thing is the passion. You just have to have the drive to do it. But in terms of equipment, of course, you need a camera, but it's not like in terms of the highest quality of camera, whatever decent that you can afford is good. If you can't afford a camera, if you have a smartphone, it's also something. But I mean, you can use that to work professionally. But in all, I think it's all about you being interested, attending this type of webinar, then also going online to look at, I've done a lot of teachings on photography in different places. I can also share the link much later. But in general, I think the most important thing, there are lots and lots of resources available online. When I learned about photography, I haven't seen a camera, and I knew how to use a camera just by reading about it. So I think the most important thing is that interest, and being that passionate, and always looking for ways to develop. But most importantly, going out to do the work. So you don't have to start with photographing for New York Times. Obviously, New York Times will not hire you if they might never hire you. I've seen photographers that have worked for 10, 15 years and they got their first assignment that, but the most important thing is you telling stories on day-to-day basis of things that are around you, and keep developing and building on that.
Oh, that's a really, really good response. There is also this question still on ethics regarding we have some country. This person is, I think, from Liberia. The question is, they are always told not to photograph the president or vice president while eating.
Yeah.
So, what if you are able to take that kind of picture and you put it out there? Is it an ethical violation? And so how will you handle this?
Um, why there is that restriction is because it's not appealing. I think it's not good to photograph people when they're eating, generally. I mean, would you like to be photographed when you're opening your mouth, enjoying your meal? Uh, so I think it's important, like I said, and this thing happens a lot because once you go behind the viewfinder, once you are behind the camera, you feel like you are not part of, you feel like you are invisible. And it's important that you also understand that you're dealing with real human beings and you ask yourself, would you like to be photographed like this? And then another question you have to ask yourself is, what story does it tell? How important is this? So if you're doing a story around food and nutrition about the president, maybe
That
that
can work.
picture would be relevant, but if you're talking about a president that is discussing economic issues in the country or talking about insecurity, how relevant is him eating, to that scene, So we before I even click the shutter, sometimes I've been in places where I've seen maybe a child is on the floor and there is a lot of flies on their body. I ask myself, how relevant is this picture to my story? And I end up not taking the picture. If you can ask that question in the first place, you will understand that there are lots of other ways, or there are lots of other pictures. It's not hard to look, if you want to look for pictures of Black African children naked on the street, it's not hard to find, but I won't contribute to that because it's not relevant to my story. So I think it's important for you to ask yourself, this picture I'm about to click, this picture I'm about to take, how does it play? Is it important for the story? Look at it as writing as well, or look at it as filmmaking. If you're producing a film, would this scene be relevant? So yeah, that's how
Yeah,
I approach it. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for that. Farmers in
Yeah.
Kenya would like to know whether Instagram page is good enough to showcase a photojournalist portfolio, or will you recommend a photojournalist having a website?
Um, Honestly, I strongly recommend you have a website. And this is for a few reasons, because, with your website, you're more in control of what you're showing and how, it is being presented, you know. Social media is also good, but I would strongly advise, if you have the resources, get your own website. If you don't have the resources, there are a bunch of other free platforms where you can publish your work. But social media is also very key. But why I say you have to be careful with that is because I've seen a lot of young journalists, photographers that get frustrated because they are not getting a lot of likes. Like when I put out content on my social media, the type of audience that likes, photojournalism will be appreciated more in the community of people that understand what photojournalism is all about. But, for a typical, maybe a picture of a child crying or whatever will get more traffic, but as a photojournalist, maybe it's nothing. So it's important for you to understand who your audience is, but most importantly, produce work for yourself in a way that it reflects your identity and what you are trying to say out there. But yeah, please, by all means, have a social media account, but don't get in the rat race of likes and follows and whatever, because it's very frustrating and depressing. But have your website, because the website shows you're serious. Having a website shows, what if Instagram goes down and they delete all your content? Then you also talk about copyright issues. You know, Instagram, anything you put up on Instagram is basically, you've given Instagram right to make money out of it, you know, literally. And there has been issues where even publications, instead of licensing pictures from people, they go to their Instagram and embed the link of the Instagram post on their website, which is basically showing the picture. And, you know, a lot of people have lost this case. So you have to be really, really careful about how, if you want to get the full royalties and financial value associated with use of your work, it's important that you have your own website.
Yeah, thank you. Tom Price would like to know what your go-to equipment for an assignment is.
To be honest, I don't like, you know, it's I don't know why people are, I mean, when I was starting off, I think I was interested in this question. But before I answer it, I think it's important to understand, it's like you taste someone's food and it's nice and you're asking, what gas cooker do you use? You know, like it's not relevant in the discourse, to be honest, because whether I'm using phone to take picture, whether I'm using camera to take picture, you know, it's still me taking the picture. It's still my eyes, it's still my vision. And I think that's where you should work on, rather than
KC,
what equipment.
what is your go-to
You know,
equipment?
no, slow down. No, why I'm saying this, it's very important. It's very, very important. But presently I use a Nikon camera, and I use 2 lenses. I don't like zoom lenses personally. I prefer to use fixed prime lenses, which is basically a lens that has only one focal length. So I use a 50 mm for my portraits, and I use 28 mm for most of my other pictures. Yeah, I don't have any zoom lenses, but I like to get I like the intimacy. I like to be inside the action, but zoom lenses kind of keeps you a bit far from the action and you're zooming in. I don't like it. I don't like how the pictures come out, but I would use zoom lens if it's not safe for me to get close, but I've not been in that type of situation though. Yeah.
I think Tom, from his follow-up question, appears to be a photojournalist too, because
Who is
the
that?
follow-up question, the person that asked that question regarding the
Okay.
equipment
Okay.
used, because
Yeah.
there is a follow-up question from Tom. Tom is saying, I'd also be really interested to know more about KC's editing process. How much is it a collaboration with your editors, and how tight a selection would he make before submitting it? And how do you manage documenting consent in your context? So these are 2 follow-up questions.
Yeah, the first question is how the collaboration between the editor and the photographer.
Yes.
So before an editor hires you, they look through your portfolio. So your portfolio is more like your past work. So already, if you're hiring me, you know what the work, you know what my outcome would likely look like. You know what my pictures look like. But the editor has the ultimate decision to select what pictures runs, at what is the sequence, how many pictures, which one will be spread out more, and whatever. Like, I don't have any contribution to that. I've also worked with editors that say, hey, like, which pictures do you think are your best, or which stories do you want? Even with a writer, sometimes I've had a writer kind of focus more on a specific character because I liked the pictures of that character. And, you know, she's trying to build a narrative around that person. So there are lots of layers around it, but ultimately I select my pictures myself. But I give, for a piece, averagely, you won't get 6 or 8 pictures in that piece. It's quite a lot. So for an assignment, I will file like way more than that. So if the pictures, depending on how many days I shoot, but I could file as much as 25, 30, or 40 pictures that I think is relevant for my stories, you know. What was the other question?
The
Um,
the other question is on how you manage to document consent.
Okay. Yeah, I usually have people sign, but in most cases, I also use my phone to record a video to kind of there are rare cases where people come up and say, hey, you didn't take I've shot for for an NGO. For publication, I don't need consent really. I just need to inform them because it's editorial, it's reportage of what's going on. But I also feel the need to tell them, like, okay, if I'm getting into their personal space, this is what I'm doing. But if it's in a public space, I don't need to inform them. I can just get the picture. But also bear in mind that these are human beings and it could be me. How do I want them to be photographed? But if I'm working for NGOs and stuff like that, the way I record my consent is, by signing. In some cases, I just have them record. I will ask them, hey, I will explain why I'm taking the pictures, like 10, 15 seconds, 20 seconds video of them agreeing to have their pictures published and used and me photographing them. So that's one way I usually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So there's another question from Hugh Buane. The question is this, do your magazine and newspaper editors decide whether you need to submit your pictures in color or in black and white? Or do you get to have a say in that?
Um, I honestly, like, I've never submitted any picture in black and white. I only post pictures in black and white on my social media, on my Instagram. And that's because, personally, I like to strip my pictures of the whole aesthetics or whatever. Like, I just want you to focus on the story. And that's just for my Instagram. On my website, most of my pictures are in color. But I think unless the story is, unless there is a clear reason why it needs to be published in black and white, you would usually submit the pictures in color. In cases where I feel like, this picture is so important, I feel it should go in black and white, I will submit two copies. So the color version and the black and white version, and the editor can choose which one. But I don't have any decision to make on that. I can only decide that on my own platform, on my website or on my social media.
So if an editor takes a color picture and turns it to black and white, you don't mind?
Yeah, it doesn't matter because there are some, like New York Times, for instance, there are some prints that come in black and white. So automatically your pictures will be in black and white. Then there are some Sunday Best or whatever that comes in color. So you get me? So you don't really have a lot of decision to make on that. It's the decision of the publication. But if it's my personal work and I shot it in black and white, so we have to also understand, it depends on the relationship you have with the publication. If they reached out to you, hey, we want you to photograph this for us, which is still my picture, but I give them right to use the pictures, it's different. But if it's a project I've worked on, I've developed, and they want to publish it, then they will have to publish it on my own terms, in terms of whether it's colored or black and white. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Kathy would like to know, when did you get comfortable calling yourself photojournalist versus only photographer? And did you show a mix of portraits, events, and some documentary in the beginning? I think no. Those photography pictures you showed were all at once. So you did not miss anything at the beginning regarding pictures. So can you take the question on when you became comfortable calling yourself a photojournalist?
I became comfortable calling myself a photojournalist after I got training, because I'm in a part of the world where photojournalism is not very mainstream. Like, when I mean mainstream, I don't think there's any university that offers a 4 years course on documentary photography and photojournalism. My wife studied that. She has a bachelor's degree in documentary photography and photojournalism. I'm not sure there is any university in Nigeria that offers that. So it gets to a place where you're taking pictures and you're asking yourself, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And you don't know the rules. You don't know what you are doing. So I think I became very comfortable to call myself a photojournalist after I got training, and I attended a couple of workshops, both internationally. You know, I've attended workshops in New York, in Rwanda, you know, a lot of them. Did a couple of portfolio reviews. So I kind of started understanding what I was doing and how I fitted into the bigger whole of the whole thing going on. So I think it was after I got some level of training and I got published that I kind of started seeing myself as a photojournalist.
So we are back to the question on to the questions on consent. And
Yeah,
at
these
what
people
time do
like
you at what time do you get consent? Is it before taking the picture or after taking the picture?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the incident. It depends on the instance, right? So I've worked with some NGOs, for instance, will say, "Oh, we want signed consent, right?" But there are some communities you go to, these people have never signed anything, you know, like, so once you pull out the paper, they're already scared, like, you know, am I giving up my birthright or whatever? So for me, it comes with that conversation. I don't jump into a scene, and that's why I don't call myself like a core photojournalist in this sense, because I hardly go to breaking news sites to take pictures. I hardly, you know, I kind of want to take things slow. I want to have a conversation with the people involved, and you understand why I'm doing this, you know. And for me, having that conversation, telling you how that I'm going to be taking pictures, why I'm taking pictures, that is consent, and you agree. So consent mustn't be written. It could be oral. It could be, you know, based on that understanding. So for me, that's where I start. I start with having these conversations with people for them to understand what I'm doing and understand that, because look at my pictures. It doesn't look like I'm there. You know, if you look at my pictures, you would be wondering, like, was I there? It's because I've already formed some form of cordial relationship with these people, and they understand what I'm doing, that they are able to do what they do normally. Like I'm not there, like I'm literally hanging out with them and I'm taking pictures when the opportunities come. So that's how I approach consent. But it depends on the topic as well. If you're doing stories around rape and stuff, you also have to care about, does this person's identity, usually I cover people's identities in that regard, unless they don't mind and they have been published by numerous people and they are happy to show their face and they feel it's safe for them. But in general, for people that feel unsafe, there are other ways to take pictures of them in a way that it kind of obscures their identity. So for me, I think it comes in these conversations and spending time with the people you want to photograph before you photograph them.
Okay, this question, let me read it as the person wrote it. Do you normally reach out to people online before you travel or at a place? If the police are quite strict in a place, how does that change how you reach out to people and how you manage informing people of your project?
Yeah, from the get-go, I also mentioned that photojournalism is like 30 minutes taking pictures, 30% of taking pictures, really. So there is planning, there is security, there is sometimes when I travel to places, in as much as I'm a Nigerian, I'm still not an insider of those communities. I probably don't speak the language. So I need a familiar face in that region that could, they call it a fixer in photojournalism or journalism in general. So this is usually someone from that community that is very much connected, that the people trust, that would introduce you to that community. So usually before I go to any community, I have to have like a fixer that knows the place, and he's my go-to person.
Okay.
Yeah, to work in that region. Yeah. Unless it's a place I'm well connected in, or a place that is, I don't need to, so you have to research these things and know which one you have to apply in that case.
Okay, thank you. Judge Build, we still have a lot of several questions for you. Judge Build, a very straightforward question. Do you have difficulty editing or curating your photos?
Um, it depends, but I've noticed that, you know, with more years of experience, it's becoming a little bit easier and easier. But I think the most difficult part is knowing what picture is relevant and which is not. But it comes with experience. At the moment, I the stress I go through is less. Like now, I can go out on assignment and I can say, okay, I'm sure that these pictures will be featured on this publication, on the piece. So yeah, the difficulty is there, but it kind of starts going down with more experience. And also I utilize my network of friends. My wife is a photo editor, so sometimes she helps me take a look at my pictures before I even file them. Yeah, so it helps as well.
Yeah, we have a question here that how can one get money from platforms like Getty Images and Shutterstock? Is there a theory to this?
I'm not very experienced with stock image, but I know that the way they work is they pay you based on how many people that downloads the pictures. I've rarely seen photographers that survive off stock photography because the commissions are very, very limited. And, you know, sometimes the purchase is even more complicated than that. So I'm not really very much experienced in stock photography. So I'm not sure my input will be very useful.
It's okay. We have another question, which is, I think, for a photojournalist that wants their pictures to be published international platforms like BBC, Al Jazeera, AP, and Reuters. How do you think that they are already very good? How do you think they should go about getting the attention of these outlets?
Like I mentioned earlier, photojournalism is not about good pictures. A lot of people can take good pictures, a lot, you know. It's about storytelling. And, you know, if it's not new, it's not news, obviously. So if you worked on something and you think is worthy of being published, then, you know, you have to reach out to editors. So if it's a photography, like a photo essay, then you have to reach out to a photo editor. And there are lots of like the New York Times and Washington Post, I think, they have like dedicated photography platforms where they just share mostly photography, but very little write-up. So these places are also good for um, uh, to get your stuff published. But also don't think that as a photographer, because you've taken good pictures, you know, BBC will not run a piece that is just based on pictures, you know. So you also have to find like a writer to work with, if you can write, to kind of write a piece around what you're saying. But it needs to be new. It needs to bring a fresh perspective. It needs to be nuanced, you know, and these are the things that kind of make stories. And honestly, it's difficult. I've never reached out to any publication to have any of my stuff published. Most of the time, I work in collaboration with the publications to take pictures for those specific things. But if you have a work that you think is very, very important and key, you can always reach out to editors in those places.
Now,
you can also Google to find them, you know, or go
oh
on
yes,
social media to find them. Yeah.
yeah. As an addition to in addition to that question, I think social media, especially Twitter, is really, really underrated, and
Yeah.
many journalists and photojournalists are not maximizing it to the fullest. Most
Yeah.
of these editors are always on social media. When they have something on their minds, that they are bothered about, they do let out, or even if they have opportunities, once in a while, they put their minds out there on Twitter. I can't even count the number of story commissions that I've gotten by just following these editors that that will now share that, okay, he or she needs a story or a particular picture by this so and so period. So if you desire to have your pictures on BBC or Reuters or any of these top platforms, make sure you are following the editors. And when there is such calls, you'll be able to quickly respond. And I would like to drag you into phone photography. The reason why I said is phone photography, I'm dragging you, it's that is my top. That's something that I always swear about. And I've if I don't I have personal digital cameras, but I don't consider digital cameras being able to work in many settings. For instance, if you have to quickly take a particular picture, and you know, in some contexts, some people will smile at you when you are taking picture with a phone, but immediately you bring out your expensive photographic gadget, they become reluctant and you miss that kind of picture. So, but you said you usually build relationships. That is for when you are doing documentary, but at the spur of the moment photography, at the spur of the moment photojournalism, for somebody that is using, even if it's a camera phone that the person has, what do you think can still be done so that you can still produce top quality pictures? And there is a question from Andres. Andres is asking, in addition to my question, that do you have an iPhone editing app for on-the-go projects?
For for work, I take pictures with my camera, but I also take pictures with my phone sometimes. Not just, I also use my phone to kind of document myself, whilst I'm working. For photo editing software, I use Lightroom on my phone. There is also another app called Snapseed. It's made by Google. Which is very, very nice. I use it most of the time for my editing on my phone. But in general, I think the rules of photography is the same, wherever, if I'm using a phone camera, I will still make the best out of it because I understand how light works. I understand when to click the shutter. I understand composition, So I think these are like the key elements of photography that is important. But in terms of photojournalism, you also have to have an idea of why you are doing what you're doing and how you need to present it in a way that people can just look at it and not notice that there is a photographer in the scene, because that's the difficult part. Like, I hardly photograph people looking at me smiling and stuff, like, and I don't tell you, oh, don't smile or not, but I catch you doing stuff. And this only happens when you spend enough time. So if there is, I don't know, let's say you come to a crash site, for instance, it's a tragic moment. People are crying. Nobody would notice you as a photographer taking pictures there, because they're, and also as a photographer, you try to be respectful. People are grieving. It's human beings. I need to capture the situation, but I also don't try to get in too much in other people's experiences where I also try to be a human being. I know when to bring down my camera. So I try to get the moment that I need and take away my camera, and get to the next space. So I think phone camera is the same. It's all about your vision and how you see, And obviously with cameras, the resolution is way higher. So if you're printing, if you want to blow it up, phone can't do that. Most phones.
Have you seen the most recent device phones? The cameras on some of those phones are crazy.
No, most phones will still be pixelated once you blow it up. Most, but there are still phones that are really good. But for the basic use of what we need pictures for, which is just showing it on internet or on TV, maybe phone can also compete, but not to camera. The details in a DSLR is way higher.
Okay, I've never done this, but let me give you this challenge. Is this picture a phone taking this published picture taken with a phone or with a camera? Look at your screen.
The picture is in low quality, so it looks like a phone. I can see that the picture muddy. Like at the hand area, I can see that this is a Samsung phone or something, or Android actually, because it
No,
feels like, yeah, what phone is this?
it's not iPhone.
No, it doesn't look like iPhone. Like it feels like it's zoomed in, kind of. Does that
No,
make
it
sense?
wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah, but I mean, a camera will still do better than this. If you put an
Yeah,
iPhone and a
but
camera,
okay, but
yeah.
if I tell you the story behind this picture, it was a one-click shot.
But I don't think it was a good picture though.
You could not have taken it with a camera because the person was just raising it and you had to quickly remove. So these are the advantages that you get with
No,
a phone.
I will get this with a camera. I'll even get a better picture. Like the hand is,
Okay.
is wrongly cropped first.
No,
You
no,
know,
nobody.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
then the question this person asked, the reason I'm
yeah,
showing is that it's answering a question that somebody is asking, Judge Bloy, whether
yeah.
you've actually written a story that you also took the picture. Has that happened to you before?
No, no, I'm not very good with writing. So I leave the writing for my, I'm not a good writer. So the
But
only
it doesn't
writing I
mean,
do, the
but
only
it doesn't
writing
mean
I
that.
do is like narrative of my pictures, of my photo story.
Okay.
But I don't know
Okay.
how to write. Maybe I'll get there someday, but it's not my strength. Yeah.
Okay. But for
Yeah.
George, it doesn't mean that that's not possible.
No,
Even
it's
though
very
it's
possible.
so like this photo, I took it and I wrote the story. So it's something that everybody can actually do. You don't have to be, for most of the time, is all about the picture being relevant to the story and
Yeah.
you being able to follow the rules. And if you have agreed with me from everything that KC has been saying, education, learning on the job is really, really important. No matter how much you desire to actually work to be a photojournalist, you cannot become a very good photojournalist if you do not take the first step, if you do not position yourself to be committed to actually do this thing. And it's all about you maximizing the rights, the equipment, the devices within you, and being visionary. So the last question, I saved this question for the last for you. And it's from, the question is this, how competitive is working as a photojournalist at the moment? And has COVID-19 lessened the competition given the current international travel restrictions? And uh, okay, yes, those are the questions. The other stuff is a comment, which is you are joining on the spot, so to speak, and therefore work is steady. So yeah, how do you answer the question on competition in the light of COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, there is huge competition. There are lots and lots of talents out there, and you know, I mean, if you're competing in Nigeria, you can imagine what it looks like. You're competing against 200 million people, so obviously there is a lot of talents and there is a lot of competition. But that's where carving a niche for yourself comes in, because if you stay in something for a while, you kind of build credibility in that regard, and people can kind of like understand that, okay, this is what your practice is about, and you can build on that. You get me? So yeah, competition is real. It's hard, but we we keep going and we keep building on that. Sorry, I was a bit distracted. Then the second question is COVID. COVID, I already mentioned that, it kind of, as a result of the travel restrictions and limited work, the countries that usually send, focus on this region to do stories, they're focusing on themselves because they have their own emergencies to deal with. So it kind of reduced the type of stories that you could do, because whichever way you look at it, photojournalism is expensive. Journalism in general is expensive, and we don't have a lot of the financing, coming from a local source. So it makes it a bit difficult. But in general, I also think, it also created like opportunities for me as well. Like in 2020, when there was lockdown, I had photojournalists from other countries that had assignments and they couldn't do it, and they say, hey, help me do this assignment, which was good. Not really that it's good, but it was the reality of the time. So it kind of gave me more opportunities, in that regard. But in general, the competitions, is there. If it's not competitive, then everyone would do it. So you just have to keep building a brand and keep staying straightforward and keep finding the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, so that, even if it's not as lucrative. I always say this: if you want to be a rich person, don't be a photojournalist. Don't even be a journalist at all. You should go into business or something. So we do this because we were passionate about it. But in as much as we're passionate, we want to feed, we want to provide for our family. But the primary thing is the passion. So whether or not is as lucrative as you want it to be, you will keep pushing because you love it. Yeah.
So my very last question.
You said that was your last question.
Sorry. It's a very important one.
Okay.
Have you had to deal with plagiarism, and what do you think? What's your recommendation for photojournalists whose pictures are being used by outlets without their consent?
I've not had that issue because I don't know, like I've seen people repost my work on their social media. Some have even like put their name, and stuff. But the truth is, anything you put out on social media, on the internet, like you can't control it. You can't control how it's used. And you can be there, the best you can do is to reach out to people and say, hey, please take down my work. I've had people take down the work. I've had people prove stubborn. I just blocked them. But I've not had a situation where a publication or an organization uses my pictures without permission. For that type of incident, a lawyer would have to write them a letter or something, for that regard. But yeah, you just have to keep protecting your work. For some, writing copyrights on your pictures is helpful. I don't like to do it. I feel like it takes away attention from the picture, so I don't like it. But if that helps you, maybe you can put it on your pictures. But yeah, like ultimately, if the picture, that's why you need a website as well, because you can build a case on people when they take your pictures from your website more. But yeah, you can't do anything about it, unless someone that has money uses your pictures, then you can sue them and make some money. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Thanks
Yeah.
so much, KC,
Yeah.
for joining us today. We are
Yeah.
really glad to have you, and we really gone way beyond the time for these allotted for this webinar, and it's just
Yeah.
because there are lots of questions that are
Yeah.
very, very important to the individual lives of people that are at different stages in their photojournalism. So for
Yeah.
everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope this webinar helps inform you better on the art and practice of photojournalism. And importantly, helps inspire new angles for photojournalism stories, whichever level you are in your career. And if you're not a member of the ICFJ Global Health Crisis Reporting Forum yet, I encourage you to please find the group on Facebook. And for more information about the forum, please visit www.icfj.org. And if you would like to access journalism resources on COVID-19, please check out the International Journalist Network at www.ijnet.org. And please don't forget to fill out a survey coming to your inbox after this webinar, because ICFJ would love your feedback to improve programming for this series. So, and from me and from everyone at SCFJ, we want to say thank you to KC and wish you a very great day to everyone. And we'll see you very soon, some other time next week. So have a lovely day. Bye.